application. So let me just log into this web application. Username is admin and password is password. And initially we will set our security level to low. I will set this to low and I will click on submit, and we can just confirm that we have logged in as admin and security level is set to low. We can quickly jump on to SQL injection vulnerability, and here is our web application. So first we will try to understand how exactly this web application is behaving. So user ID. From this particular input, I just understand that we can supply any user IDs like 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and it has to supply the values. So when I type 1 and then when I click on submit, it is actually fetching the information from the database. So ID is 1, first name is admin, surname is also admin. And when I type 2, you can actually see it is just fetching some other information. So before we perform any attack, we need to be very clear with the objective. So our first and foremost step is to find out what is our objective and what are we expected to find out with this SQL injection attack. So for that, we can just go to view help and then we will see what is our objective. And when you look at here, our objective clearly says that there are 5 users in the database with IDs from 1 to 5. And our mission is to steal their passwords via SQL injection. So now our mission is very clear and we are expected to steal the passwords. So in order to perform this particular attack and to steal the passwords, there are certain things which we need to identify. So first we need to identify the structure of this particular table. So like how many columns that this particular table has, and the column which we are looking for, the passwords is present in under which column name. So we don't know any information about this particular table. So we will just try to estimate or we will try to enumerate certain information about this table. Only then we can able to fetch the passwords from that particular table. So this particular web application is fetching some information from the database like first name and then the surname. So from this we can clearly see that that particular table should have a column name called ID, and there should be a column name called first name because from there it is fetching the Jordan, and there must be some column name which is carrying the surname, and from there it is fetching the Brown, that is second name. So our first step is step 1 is to find number of columns fetched from the database. So that is the first one, and we can do this in 2 methods. So first method is by using order by command. So what is actually order by command? So this order by command is used to sort the fetched rows from the database. So in order to give you a better example, let's say there is a table which has 3 columns. So let us say ID, let us say first name, and let us say last name. So what happens if we give order by 1 means this particular entry, whatever that we get here, will be ordered based on the first column. So if you are not getting any error, or if you are seeing some information on the web application, which means that this order by 1 has been correctly executed. And then if we say order by 2, which means that it sorts all the information based on the second column, which means it will order everything based on the first name. So let us say there are entries 1, 2 and 3, and the first name starts with A, D and C, and last name starts with X, Y and Z. So if we give order by 1, this information what is being fetched will be in this particular order. So 1, 2 and 3. And if we give order by 2, the information will be sorted based on the first name. So based on the first name, A comes first, C comes next and D comes next. So if we sort by 3, information will be sorted based on the third column. So X, Y and Z. So this is how the information will be sorted, and then it will be displayed on the web application. So that is the primary application of this order by. And what if we give order by 4? If we give order by 4, there is no column being fetched from the database as a fourth column. When there is no column is being fetched from the database, it turns out to be an error. So we have to perform this order by command until we get an error. So if you are getting error at order by 5, then it means that we are fetching 4 number of columns. So we will try that in our web application, and then we will see how many number of columns are being fetched. So in order to inject our command, we have to break the syntax the previous query. So for that we need to pass a single quotes which actually breaks the previous command, and then we are passing the command order by, and then we are sending order by 1, and followed by we are sending an comment symbol. So what happens here is anything which is beyond this particular hash will not be considered and the query will be stopped. So what I can do is I can just copy this particular payload, and then I will paste it over here in our web application, and then I will click on submit. So we can see that there is no error, and we can still able to see the contents of the web application, which means it is not giving any error. So this particular payload is giving no error. So similarly, what we can do is we have to repeat this particular process until we get an error. So this time I will try to order by 2. So let me just copy this, and then I will paste it here. Even for order by 2 there is no error, which means there are 2 columns being fetched. So even for this there is no error, and I will try to pass on for 3. Let me just copy this, and then I will paste it here. And when we submit 3, it is actually returning nothing, or this is equivalent to the error. So which means that there is no third column. So from this we can actually able to conclude that the SQL or the web application is actually fetching only 2 columns. Application fetches 2 columns only. So even though we see 3 entries over here, let me submit it over here. Even though we see 3 entries over here, but only 2 informations are being fetched from the table. We don't know which information is being fetched from the table, but for now any of these 2 is actually fetched from the database, and the rest is actually displayed through some other means. So that is what we have enumerated till now. So this is the first method. We can do the same thing by using another command called union command. So we can use an union command to do the same thing. So here in union command, what we will actually do is, so I'm just breaking the syntax by passing a single quote, and then I'm passing union, and then I'm selecting select. I'm just asking the database to select nothing. So it don't has to select anything. It is just going to send an empty value. So empty value will be represented by using null. So I'm just passing one particular null, and then I'm commenting out the rest of the statement. This union command is actually used to combine 2 SQL queries. Let's say you have SQL query 1, and then you have SQL query 2. In order to combine these 2 queries, we will be using union. So this union command will actually combine these 2 queries, and then it will fetch all the informations based on that. But there is one problem with this particular union command. This union command will function properly only if both the SQL queries have same number of columns. So only if both the queries have the same number of columns, the union function will work, or the union command will work. So we can use this particular command and we can identify how many number of columns are being actually fetched from the database. So I will select this exploit and then I will paste it over here. Then I will click on submit and then we can see an error because the web application is actually having an SQL query 1, which is actually fetching the first name, the last name, and then the ID. We don't know how many informations are being fetched, but let us assume that SQL injection or SQL command which is specified in the web application is fetching some number of columns from the database, and then we have actually sent another SQL query, that is SQL2, which we have asked to select one null value, which means we are asking to select only one column with an empty value. So here there might be multiple number of entries. So here we are asking to select one number of entries and here there might be some entry. Let us assume that it is fetching X number of entries. So since we got an error, we can assume that X is not equal to 1. Definitely this is not actually fetching one number of column. So we have to repeat this particular command until we get an positive response. So that is how we will find out how many number of columns are being fetched from the database. So now let us try to increase the number of columns of our SQL query. So this has actually given us error, which means number of columns is not equal to 1, and I will just repeat this particular payload for two number of nulls. So we can just try to combine another command, another column. So I will copy this and then I will paste it here. And when we click on submit, you can actually see that the web application has responded something. And then we can also confirm that this particular web application is fetching two number of columns. And this particular ID, now we can understand whatever that we type here in this particular field, it is being reflected in this ID space, which means that this particular field is not being fetched from the database, and this web application is fetching only these two information from the database, which means the first name and then the surname is being fetched from the database and ID column is not fetched from the database. Earlier, by this particular method, we have identified that there are two columns being fetched and we do not understand which column is being fetched from the database. But with this particular method, by using union command, we can actually able to identify which column is being fetched from the database. So here in our example, ID is not fetched from the database, only the first name and surname is being fetched from the database. So this method also confirms that two columns are fetched from the database. So that is what we have identified. So even in this particular method, we have concluded that there are two columns fetched, and even in this method, we have concluded that there are two columns being fetched. So now we have identified there are two columns being fetched. Now our next task is to find all the columns present in this table. So that is what we are just going to do now. We are just going to find out all the columns which is being present in this particular table. So this is our exploit we are going to use for the rest of the session. So anything beyond this is going to be broken, and then we are just sending this particular value, right? So what we are going to do here is we are just going to select all the column values. We are just going to pass all the column names in this particular field, and then we are going to keep this particular string as empty. So let's try to pull all the column names. So from where do we collect all the column names is like, it is from information schema, right? And for that we need to know what are all the user table which is present, and that can be identified from view source. So if we just look into the view source button, I can actually able to see that this is the query which is being constructed at the backend. So by looking at this particular query, we can also confirm that it is actually constructing a query like select first name, last name from the table called users, where user ID equals to user ID like this, which means that whatever the input that we are giving in this particular ID, it is being sent as a get request to the database, and that particular ID is being substituted in this query, and this is validating by using where class, and it is bringing the first name and then the last name, and that is being displayed in our web application. So with from this particular query, we can clearly understand that there is a table name called users. So since this is an vulnerable web application, we can able to see this particular information, but whereas in real time we could not able to see this information. So in those case, we have to look into the database documentation, and we have to check the total list of tables present, and from there on we have to enumerate each and every table and the columns which is present in each and every table. But here in this case, we don't have to take that pain. So here it is clearly mentioned that there is a table called users, because the query is actually fetching all these information from a table name called users. So we can use this information in our payload. So what we can do is, I'm just slightly modifying this particular payload. So this particular web application is using MySQL. So in MySQL, there is an metadata of all the tables. There is a read-only table called information schema. So this information schema will contain the entire structure of the database. It contains the list of all the tables and the columns which is present in all the tables and everything. This is just a read-only table. We will try to enumerate the required information from this particular table. So in order to enumerate the column name, the default name is column name. Column underscore name. So we are trying to fetch the column name, and the second column I will leave it as null itself, because we need to match the number of columns to the actual query. So from the query there are two columns being fetched, so here also we have to fetch two columns. So one column I am just passing the information of column name, and the second column I am leaving it blank as it is, and I am asking to fetch this information from the table called information underscore schema dot columns. So this is an default command which we will be using for MySQL, and when the SQL or the database type changes, you have to look into the documentation and you have to use the appropriate commands over here. And where now we know the table name, so I am specifying the table name. Table name is equal to users. So this is what our command is. So actually what I'm going to do is, I'm just union my malicious payload. I'm trying to enumerate the column names which is present in the information schema table, and I'm trying to list out all the columns which is present in the users table. So there will be another query, and I'm just bypassing it by using an union command. So this is what my payload is. I'll just copy this payload and then I will paste it over here, and then I will click on submit. And now you can see that it has fetched all the column names. So there is an ID. So this ID field, as we know, it is just going to spit out whatever that we have typed it in the text box. So here in place of first name, it is just fetching the column name of the table called users. So here we can actually see there is a column called first name, last name, user. There is a column called password. So now we have actually identified that this users table is actually having a column called password, and our objective is to fetch all the information present in this particular password. So let me just query it. So now we have just identified the password is present in this particular table itself, and now comes the third step. So our third step is to display all the passwords with the user names. So that's what our next query will be. So what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to use the same payload. Okay, let me just take our normal payload. So here is what it is, and I'm just going to create it now. So now I'm just going to fetch, in place of first column, we are just going to pass in here. We have an column called user, so let me just pass in that particular command. So in the first column, in the name, in the place of first name, I should get the username, and in the place of surname, I should get passwords. I should get password. So these information has to be fetched from which table, that has to be mentioned. So from users. So that's what our payload is. So here is a simple payload. We are just selecting a column called user and then the password from the user, from the table called users. So this is our payload now, and when we just pass on this particular payload, this is going to list out all the passwords of all the users. So here in the place of first name we are getting the username, and here in the place of surname we are just getting the passwords, and all these passwords are saved as hash value, but that doesn't matter. So when we use tools like Hydra, John the Ripper or Hashcat, we can easily able to dehash this particular passwords. So finally our objective is actually met, and these are all the various username and passwords, and we can actually dump it to any document that we are taking out. So now I hope you might have understood how exactly this SQL injection is working, and the rest of the difficulty levels are fairly simple. So I will just quickly walk you through the rest of the difficulty levels. So let me go to DVWA security, and then I will change the security level to medium, and then I will click on submit. So coming back quickly to SQL injection. So here this time we don't have any space to type in our attack. So what happens here is this developer has clearly given the numbers which we are going to type, and then we are just going to click the submit button. So let me just click on one, and I will click on submit. The response remains the same, but the mode of input has been changed. Instead of getting input from the user, now it is a drop down. So now we really have very less scope of typing anything into the query, but that doesn't mean that we cannot exploit this particular web application. So it depends on how it is being implemented. So now what actually I have to do is, let me just check how this page has been implemented. So let me click on view source, and then if you look at here, so it is sending a post command, which means whatever that we type will be sent as a post request to the database, and then they are using an sanitization mechanism called real escape strings, which means that it is going to remove all the special characters that you type inside the query. But still the problem is this particular ID is directly being fed into the query construction. The query is constructed with the actual input. So the query does not change anything, so that the vulnerability is still present over here. So what we can do is we will try to understand what are all the things that is being sent as a post. So we need proxy software to intercept the packet. So here I have a ZA proxy. Let me just fire up that ZA proxy quickly. So let me snap both the windows side by side for better visibility. And now what I can do is I can just click on the Foxy proxy, and I can turn on this to intercept the packet, and then I will just try to capture a dummy request. So yeah, so now we got the dummy request over here, and when you look at this particular request that we captured in Zap, it is actually sending a post method, and when you look into the request, it is actually sending id is equals to 1 and submit equals to submit. So what we can do is we can just intercept this, and we can try our payload over here. So instead of 1, what we can do is we can just type in our payload. So just to check if our payload is actually being working, I will I will open up this particular request on the repeater or the requester. I will just open up this on the requester tab. So now I have the requester tab here, and what we will do now, we can able to see that the request and response side by side, and for this particular post request we can able to get a positive response. So what I will try to do is I will try to send the same payload over here. So our usual payload is over here, union select username password and this particular thing. So submit button is required, so comment is not required, so I think we can take up to here. Let me just copy this and then I will paste it over here. So what actually happens here, we have actually seen that this particular special character is going to be removed from our query. So anyway, this is not going to work. So let me just open up this. Let me just take all the special characters and then we will try to submit this particular query. And we could actually able to see that there is this response has actually succeeded and then we got a response. So what we can do is we can just intercept this particular packet and then we will see whether we can submit this request to the database. I will just copy this payload and then I will just snap it to the side and I will turn on the interception so that the packets will be captured and I will click on submit. So here there is an captured packet. It is not submitted. You can actually see that the request is not submitted to the web application, and then I will modify this particular payload over here and I will click on next. Yes, so our payload has got executed and now we can actually see that it has actually listed all the passwords. So first one is actually the response of this id, because we have just sent what is this. So id is equals to 1. So for id equal to 1, it has just fetched the username and then the password, and then followed by we are sending an union command, and this particular union command is actually bringing all the user and then the password from the table called users, and that is why you are getting 5 responses after this. So that's how the exploit will work. So that is how you have to fetch all the information from the database, and the difficulty level can be high now. So let me go to DVWA security and then I will click on high security level and then I'll click on submit. So here I can quickly come to SQL injection, and this time this SQL injection is actually being changed, and here is to change your ID. When I click on that, so there is another page which is opening up and user input is being fetched from this particular web application. And as you could see, when the session ID is 1, it is just displaying all the informations. So whenever we have the space to type in our query, we can always send our payload, which worked for the low security mode. I think this payload will actually work over here because there is no change at the implementation part. So we can just we can use the same payload what we have used for the low security mode. So here is what all the passwords which is being fetched from the information. So when you look at this view page source, there will not be any change in the implementation of the query. So that is the reason why we can able to still exploit. So here they are using limit 1, but still what happens here is we are just commenting out the request even before this limit 1 is getting executed. So limit 1 is actually it is just limiting only for one responses, but this limit 1 is being escaped by using this premature comment function. So that is why we could able to get all the things, but other than that the rest of the query is being constructed as it is. So I think now you have a good understanding of about what SQL injection is. This is just an introduction to what an SQL injection will look like. An improper implementation of SQL query will lead to very serious data breaches. So getting back to our slides, in this particular session we have actually seen what exactly the databases are, and we have seen the fundamentals of how the SQL queries are being used to fetch the information from the database. And we have also had an hands-on SQL injection with the help of DVWA web application on 3 different security levels: low, medium and high. So stay tuned to this particular channel. In the next video we will be talking about blind SQL injection. So I'll be winding up the video here and I'm gonna see you in the next video. Until then, it's bye from Jay and happy learning.